When we brought Dogman here, we became part of a timeline in which Dogman existed. And so retroactively, he always had existed here.
Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Today's episode is a very special one, possibly the most special episode we've ever done. We have a guest today that I've been a huge fan of for a long time.
Why, Biggie, I didn't even know you cared.
Oh, Dr. Death, everybody. Look, I'm glad you're here, but you're not the special guest I was referring to, because the special guest is me, Henrey Lee Dogman. What? No, it's not. How did you even get in here? Has your restraining order been lifted yet? Sure, well, almost. Look, I have to announce our special guest in the first 2 minutes of the show. You guys are gonna blow it for me. Our honored collaborator is one of the most creative men on YouTube. I once left him a comment saying that I wished I could be him. He responded that he believed I could achieve this. It is with humble gratitude that I present to you one of the most enigmatic and talented scary stories tellers of our day. Why, thank you, Bigfoot. I have been waiting to be truly acknowledged on this. Cut it out, all of you. I'm running out of time. Today's guest is Bill Madon from Night Terrors. Whew, I think I made it, but I'm not sure. Mr. Madon has a channel which told true or allegedly true tales of the weird for years, but has recently switched to a format in which he tells stories from creepy, old, cobweb-covered comic books that one finds in the attic of a haunted mansion in the middle of the woods. The story that the Night Terrors host will tell you in this show is one so fantastic, so mind-bending, and paradigm-shifting that you know it must be, well, it might be, let's just say it's allegedly true. And it purports to explain the origin of the Dogman, at least relative to our world. So stay tuned for that later in the program. Today's executive producer is Gary Summers, producer and writer of the Beasties rock opera, who has been very patient with me while I took extra time to get this collaboration done. Thanks, Gary. You may remember him from Antiques Roadshow. He's the king of pop culture. If you would like to be a Scary Stories executive producer like the king of pop culture Gary Summers, all you have to do is join our channel memberships for a few bucks a month. Click the join button for more details. Okay, since you guys are all here, who wants to read this first story before we get to our collaboration? Well, I brought a really creepy story with me. Can I tell that one? Sounds good. Today's first Dogman story will be told to you by a Dogman. Henrey Lee Dogman. Take it, Hank. Well, this one is kind of a very scary story, so get ready. It's pretty straightforward and creepy even to me, and I am a Dogman. And I guess I'm gonna call it I Think the Dogman Could Hear My Thoughts. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm really not okay anymore, but I will try to make this email as logical as I can. Please feel free to rewrite parts that don't make sense, as I'm not really all there any longer after what happened to me. I was chased through the woods for about 11 straight hours by what I'm going to go ahead and call a North American upright walking canine. I don't know if it really was what it looked like, though. I wonder if it might have been some other higher form of life only impersonating a Dogman, only assuming the image of a werewolf type shape. Because this wasn't just an animal. This creature seemed to know exactly what I was thinking while I was thinking it. Since this quarantine thing started, I've been spending almost half my time out camping. It's a pretty good time for it, really, as long as you have a good apartment sitter. I have mostly had wonderful experiences, and I'm in the best shape of my life, while most of my friends have bloated up from sitting inside too much. I'm thinking of delaying or even canceling my next camping trip, though, because I'm still not really over what happened to me the last time. You see, I got targeted for harassment by something that appeared to me as a tall, bipedal, human-like wolf creature. I know how crazy that sounds, because I just read it back to myself out loud. None of my friends believe me that what I saw was real, that what stalked me all night and into the morning was really a dogman or a werewolf. They're split on whether I was being bothered by some nut job or whether I imagined the entire thing due to, quote, stress, unquote. I would like to know what stress I was under lying in my chaise lounge next to a clear fresh water stream watching the sundown, because that was the first time I saw the monster. Again, I'm not going to beat around the bush. This was a monster. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a man in a costume. It was a monster. It was an abomination. It was something from a nightmare. It was something that shouldn't exist. In the old movies, people would see monsters and they would immediately try to kill them. Enlightened minds laugh at this knee-jerk reaction because enlightened minds have never come face to face with a monster. If they had, they wouldn't laugh, and they would join in trying to find a way to snuff the sickening thing out. Enlightened minds have forgotten that true evil still does exist in this world. I was camping in woods not far from my home in Maryland. I don't want to say exactly where. I was not at an official campground. I'm very experienced and I like to find isolated locations where I can be truly alone. Something about this particular small clearing in the woods struck me as wrong, even though my eyes could find no fault with it. I probably should have kept looking, but the sun was going down, and I was already getting tired. I don't like to hike or make decisions while tired, so up went the tent, and down went my body into the chaise lounge for a quick nap before I ate something, then called it a day. Almost as soon as I lay my head down, I heard a cat crying in the woods. It sounded just like a cat I had lost as a child, and it brought back bittersweet memories. The cries grew louder and more mournful, and I began to wonder if the cat might be in trouble. It was preventing me from sleeping, so I got up out of my chaise lounge, and I decided to take a look around and see if I could help the little thing. It was surprisingly dark out already, so I brought my flashlight with me and entered under the very dark tree canopy, moving in the direction of the meowing each time I heard it. I was thinking about my mother and her reaction to me losing the cat. She shouted at me in that way she had. She blamed me for the cat going off and never returning. How was that the fault of a child? Whenever I think about it, I'm so filled with regret and horror. The poor cat. What could have happened to the sweet little thing? Was it really my fault? My mother told me at the time that I was more responsible than the likely coyote that took the cat because the coyote was following instinct. Me? I was being careless, and the cat had lost its life due to my lazy and sloppy attitude. I still feel that deep, horrible feeling, and I felt it that night as I shone my flashlight around, looking to see if I could save this kitten to make up for my original sin of having lost the previous one. Then, from just 3 or 4 feet to my right, my mother scolded me, saying my first name, my middle name, and then my last name, something she only did when she was truly angry at me. I jumped sideways in surprise. My mother couldn't be there in that dark forest. She had passed away almost 2 years prior. I shouldn't have been surprised when I looked over and saw that it wasn't my mother there at all. I shouldn't have been, but I was anyway. The thing that was making sounds like my mother would have made. The living filth that read my mind and taunted me with my own memories. It didn't even look human. It looked like a dog. Yet somehow I could see that it was laughing at me. It laughed at my confusion. It laughed at my surprise. But most of all, it was especially amused by my fear. I ran back toward my tent, intending to zip it up and pretend I hadn't seen anything, like a kid pulling the covers up over his head. But the tent was shredded. It had been ripped up and left in ribbons. I was horrified at the sight, but since then, I've come to be grateful that the monster did that. If I had gone into my tent before he tore it up, I might not still be here to tell you the story. I marched through the dark forest all night. No supplies, no backpack, only my flashlight with the dying batteries. I walked through darkness, hearing the dogman behind me following me. Sometimes he would laugh this sick-sounding way, like a hyena with a smoker's cough. Sometimes he would say things he picked out of my memories. He would bring up the meanest things my ex-girlfriends ever said to me and repeat the sentiments in their voices. He made horrible sounds of animals in terrible pain. He tormented me, and he laughed about my torment. This monster dogman saw me coming a mile away, and he made sport of me all night. I made it to a small town by the morning and booked myself into a motel to sleep the day away and regroup. Fortunately, I kept my wallet in my pocket, not in my backpack that got torn up. My credit and debit cards were useless in the woods, but quite useful the next day. I see a therapist now because of this, but we've only just begun having sessions, so I don't really know if it's gonna help. Mainly, she lets me talk and validates my feelings about things. I don't know if I really need validation as much as I need perspective. I need a new philosophy that will acknowledge the existence of evil things like the dogman, yet not lock me indoors in fear of encountering it again. I suppose I need better strategies to cope with the possibility of encountering such a thing. What would I do if there were a next time? And how do I prevent myself from worrying about it when it's not there? I know intellectually that the chances of seeing another one of these things in my lifetime is extremely small, but they're not even supposed to exist in the first place, so percentage arguments don't really calm me down about it. The way it knew what I was thinking, the way it destroyed my tent just so it could follow me all night, terrifying me. It had no intention of eating me as a real predator would. It just made me think it was a predator so it could feed off of my fear. It was more of a leech than a carnivore. It was a parasite that used the imagery of an apex land predator to get me so scared that it could suck off my energy, not unlike how vampires are supposed to do it. And that got me to thinking. They say vampires can take different forms. Most famously, they're supposed to be able to transform into bats. You've seen it in old movies, probably. But lesser known is that vampires are also supposed to be able to present themselves as wolves. When I think about it, that makes me wonder if what I ran into that night might have been a vampire. They're also supposed to possess mental powers over humans, to be able to hypnotize us. I wonder what the true form of the thing that chased me was. Does it really look like a dogman? Does it look like a human being the way vampires are portrayed in movies? Or does it really take some entirely different form? Neither dog, nor human, nor bat, or anything else we might recognize. What is the true nature of these parasitic dogmen? I wonder about it to this day because I think the dogman could hear my thoughts.
The Hollering Dogman Goo. Read by Bill Madon of Night Terrors. Dearest Scary Stories program in New York City. I would like to present you with a narrative that explains everything that has ever been explainable, and alludes to or implies that which cannot. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are curious about whether or not this next story is true, allow me to assure you, this story is truth itself. And don't worry, Dogman is in the story. The truth about Dogman, that is. It has been remarked by Westerners that Native Americans are unique in having both the concept of a bear as an individual creature, as well as the concept of bear, as in the spirit of the bear species itself. And yet, cannot every Western child tell you that both the costumed individual at the amusement park and the crayon drawing of a cartoon mouse that you stuck on the refrigerator door are indeed Mickey Mouse? Both are imbued with the spirit of Mickey Mouse, and both are Mickey Mouse in the same way that each bear is bear. Similarly, we all discuss Dogman as though there were only one of him, and we do the same with Bigfoot too. We refer to both as him more often than we refer to them as them. If you think I'm dabbling in semantics, you're only partially right. Language is imprecise. Further, language was created to explain everyday functional reality, and thereby make it easier to survive. For nearly everything, language is good enough. It must always be remembered, however, that for some things, language will never suffice. When this occurs, so does poetry, so does art, so does science and math. From the greatest artist to the least inspired, all of them are trying to tell us something. I was trying to tell the world something through my work in frontier science. I'd seized upon the idea, promulgated in some quarters, that there exists another parallel plane of reality right next to ours, and that sometimes the two reality membranes overlap and intertwine. I worked for years doing research, which has been dramatized and sold back to you as entertainment. While most of their bastardized stories were genuine fiction, with no relation to historical events. The idea that we were creating bridges between the parallel worlds, though, that was quite real. The first time my group ran an experiment in breaking the realities, we did it in the basement of a building, in a heavily populated area of a large city. Why it never occurred to us that this might be a bad idea until the first Dogman came through, I will never personally know. I watched helplessly along with my fellow workers as the horrific-looking 7 or 8 foot tall man-thing savagely terminated the existences of everyone on the other side of the unbreakable glass. Normally my duties would have required me to be on that side. Any one of my dismembered former co-workers could have been me. The creature was like a dog-headed man-ape with talon-like claws. It stood upright, yet bent over a bit, like an actor playing a Tyrannosaurus in an old monster movie. Its eyes were completely blood-red, as were its teeth and claws, drenched and wet with what was left of my friends and workmates. It screamed at the ceiling with this kind of very human-sounding version of a wolf's howl. I saw a woman named Mary that I used to date, her eyes wide as she stared at the screaming monster, less than a minute of her life remaining. The sanity drained from her. She stared at me and shouted her final words at me through the glass. "The hollering Dogman grew," she screamed. I recoiled at the gibberish that this brilliant scientist's mind had been reduced to sputtering. "The hollering Dogman goo is here," she told me, laughing, as though this were somehow a good thing. The beast took her quickly, then returned to his hollering. I had no time to allow myself to mourn in the moment. Our supervisors began an evacuation of the entire district. We survivors were deciding with the president whether to take drastic and possibly nuclear measures to contain or destroy the Dogman, when he randomly and seemingly accidentally slipped back through the portal, solving the problem for us. If he hadn't, history itself would have been drastically changed. Perhaps it already had been. We moved our operations out of the city after that. but security was lax at our next facility. It was situated far enough away from any major population that it was viewed by our superiors as safe merely because of its location. This was a simple mistake on their part that would irrevocably alter reality itself and change the history of everything within this universe and possibly outside as well. The Dogman was not the only living being which passed into our reality through the portal. We had all manner of impossible-looking things. Multiple creatures were able to get out. Think of the places Dogman and cryptids are most often reported, and one of them is where our facility was located. We never found any of the escaped beings, but I still sometimes hear people on podcasts reporting sightings of them. Who knows what their lifespan is? Do they need 2 creatures to reproduce? We had still not found the answers to any of these questions when they were released into the American wilderness. Of course, I know the answers to these and every question now. But it doesn't matter now. I shared this information with an individual who told me it couldn't be true. The first Dogman we brought through into our world was in 1968. But there are reports of Dogman stretching back decades and centuries. Why? Of course, I can easily answer this, but I don't know if you will understand. When we brought Dogman here, we became part of a timeline in which Dogman existed. And so, retroactively, he always had existed here. He didn't exist here until 1968, but after 1968, he had always existed, for even longer than the human race has. You see, I know this because one time I looked into the portal. We had strict rules about not getting too close, so I came in early when I knew nobody would be in the lab, and then I abused my privileges. I turned the machines on and the portal came back to life. I walked up to it, and I stuck my head inside the blinding white light, and I saw infinity, insanity. I saw and smelled and heard insanity, and I understood its infinite music. I saw the Dogman inside that other world, and at once I was him. I was the same Dogman that had terminated my co-workers, and I was the overarching spirit of the Dogman as well. The Dogman understood what I was curious about, and he told himself the answer. Since I was him as well, I understood the answer to my own question. There was an indescribable connection between me and the Dogman. It was more than love. It was more than kinship. We were more than brothers. We were one and the same. And so was everyone else. I saw in that moment everyone who would ever listen to me speaking these words. I saw each of you, and I realized I was you. I felt all your sorrow. I enjoyed all your personal triumphs as my own, because they were my own. I remember some of me tuning out of the show at this point, because it became too uncomfortable to hear this level of truth. And I've already experienced each of you who are still listening, and the thrill of knowing that this deep connection is real. We listen to stories about Dogman because we created the Dogman. We listen to stories about Dogman because we were created by the Dogman. Is King Ghidorah on the side of Earth in this movie, or is the 3-headed behemoth trying to destroy us? It depends on the screenwriter, but in both cases, it's still the real King Ghidorah. So is Dogman evil? I suppose that would depend on what your definition of is. Yes, we began foolishly bringing Dogman into our reality in the late 1960s, but when we did, we altered the timeline so that now they were always here. And each time we opened the vortex, we became aware of something else that we weren't aware we had changed. In the end, we must accept that before one can use one's brain, one has to go out of one's mind. To understand the world is to have gone insane. And you need no more proof than to look at the evil Dogman goo. The misunderstood Dogman goo. The relentless Dogman goo. The hollering Dogman goo.
I'd like to take a moment to say that if you have a scary story you'd like to tell us here, you can write Peter at peterbernard.com, or you can call our new Scary Stories hotline number and leave it to us in the form of a voicemail message. It's easy to remember. 804-LESCARY. That's 804-LESCARY, or 804-537-2279.
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.